Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, thank you for joining us today. My name is Sanjay Purohit. I'm from the IT and Projects Internal Audit team, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's Amplify session on reorganising work and reinventing efficiency. A warm welcome to our board members, the GLT, the media, sponsors, special guests, and all of those joining us from across the globe online through our live stream. It's fantastic to have everyone participating in the conversation through social media. If you haven't had a chance yet, you can follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and the Hub as well as Instagram. Hashtag AmplifyFest, and you can join the conversation. You can also download the application on the iStore, check into the session, ask any questions that you have, and share any of your thoughts. And I can see a few of you doing that right now on your phones, so once you've done that, please do flick your phones to silent. Our session today will be presented by Sanjay Purohit. He's a renowned strategist and innovation leader, and it is brought to us by our sponsors from Infosys. Sanjay will speak for around about 25 minutes. After that, we will continue the conversation on the couches there for some Q&A. We'll have some roving microphones going around the floor, and please raise your hand, state your name, where you're from, and we'll come around to you. If you're joining us from the live stream, on the bottom right-hand side, there's a speech bubble there. You can type in your questions at any stage throughout the feed, and it'll come through to our social media team, and we can address your queries. I guess after that we'll be wrapping up, 10 minutes to the hour, and I'd now like to invite Rohit Phatak from the Infosys team to introduce Sanjay to us.
Thanks, Ajay. Good afternoon, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to introduce Sanjay. Sanjay has been a veteran of Infosys. He's been with Infosys for the last 15 years. In these 15 years, he's played many diverse roles. He's been the head of our corporate planning and strategy. He's been head of our innovation unit. He's been the CEO and founder of EdgeVerve, which is an innovative products and platforms subsidiary within Infosys. And currently, Sanjay is the head of our global management consulting unit. Now, Sanjay is a creative, admired, well-known leader within Infosys, and more importantly, he's well-known to our clients. He is a frequent participant in global strategy and innovation forums. He's participated in the Global Economic Forum at Davos. He's been involved in the Balanced Scorecard Forum, and he's a veteran of Amplify. Now, Sanjay is passionate about innovation, all aspects of innovation. He's also passionate about social development. He devotes a lot of his time and his professional experience to the not-for-profit sector in India. Today, Sanjay is going to talk about, like Ajay said, the topic is reorganizing work and reinventing efficiency, going from human augmentation to human amplification. So please join me in welcoming Sanjay Purohit.
So good, just afternoon, right? You got to say just afternoon because it's just afternoon. Pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. Thank you to my friend Annalie for thinking about me and bringing me to this forum, and all my other friends at AMP. I know I have many friends at AMP. This is a relationship that I deeply cherish, and I make it a point to find ways and means of contributing my best, and I'm happy to be here today. I do not have a PowerPoint presentation because I'm assuming you have had lots of those, and so you're well stocked with PowerPoint, so I don't have one. What do I have is a little whiteboard. Sometimes I may want to write something or sketch something, so that's the reason I have put it up there. It was interesting when a few months ago, actually quite a few months ago, Annalie and I were talking about how she's thinking about the Amplify, and she was explaining the entire thought process about rewire, rethink, and relate. And so when I was reflecting back, it's interesting that in 2011, when I was here and I was speaking, I was speaking on a topic of building tomorrow's enterprise and how do you involve a lot of employees in the entire evolution process. And the theme of Amplify that year, if I remember it rightly, was Own Tomorrow. Right? And this time, as an organization at Infosys, we are driving a theme which is around renewal and renew and new parts of the organization. And we have a similar thought process. So it's a very interesting, so to say, subliminal relationship between the two organizations that thematically also we seem to be well connected. So what I wanted to talk about today and share with you is the whole aspect of how we are seeing organizations and ourselves drive renewal of the entire corporation and rethinking or reimagining efficiency of people, reimagining the organization from that perspective. What's also important, just to lay down, is a few facts about Infosys to give you my backdrop and my context. We are about 170,000 people organization with employees from 88 nationalities. We work across the world in literally almost all countries with about 8,000 customers that we serve. We were founded in 1981 with about $250 as a company. And it's been a very interesting and fun ride to start from 7 employees to 170,000 employees today. And obviously in this journey, I joined the journey in 2000. We were very small at that point in time again. And it's been a journey of rapid cycles of reorganization and rethinking the organization. So it's not that we are doing something new, we are doing it again. In my life at Infosys over the last 15 years, I've been through 5 to 6 reorganization cycles where we would take a 100,000 people organization and completely recast the organization in a matter of few weeks, if not months. And we believe that that is essentially very important to reinvent the organization and rethink how you are trying to do business going forward and continue to drive scale and growth. Now we are at an interesting point in time or cusp where we are thinking about what is the meaning of efficiency. How do you differentiate between amplification and augmentation as the fundamental principle? I just wanted to draw a small chart for you, assuming that this thing shows up. So if we were to look at, I know that throughout Amplify you've been spending a lot of time discussing about human experience. I've been seeing it in the tweets and the displays and the topics. And I look at it from a slightly different perspective. If you were to look at human experience on one axis and the human effort required to deliver or create this experience on the other axis, and if you were just to put a low high and a high and low here, most of the businesses, organizations typically would fall on a curve like this, where if you want to create a very high fidelity experience, the classical reflex is that it requires a lot of effort to create, the human effort to create a high fidelity experience. And if you have a very low intensity of human effort, it's expected to create a low fidelity experience. Obviously, technology changes that paradigm because you can create a very high fidelity experience with low human effort by introducing technology per se. Different organizations are placed at different points on this curve. Some organizations which are extremely experience-centric and also multi-sensory experience-centric would always have a very high human effort in delivering high-intensity experiences and so on. Then there are completely online kind of organizations which will have very low human effort, if you will. But in my mind, those are also low-fidelity experiences because they only probably touch 1 or 2 senses of the human mind in terms of how you experience life. So we can take any point. Probably a middle point is a good point to start with. The worst thing to happen is to land up somewhere here, right? Because that's when you have a disproportionate effort to experience ratio. So when you talk about the subject of amplification, I look at it as the ratio of effort to experience. And how are we really amplifying our efforts at creating a very disproportionate sense of experience with the kind of effort that we put into it. But if we place ourselves on this curve, right, There are three choices that any organization would have to create any sort of experience disruption, which essentially is to keep the entire experience same but reduce the amount of effort required. And that's what a classical technology strategy would try to do in a very, so to say, basic way, to say keep the experience same but use technology to reduce the effort of creating that experience. Right? So in a very one-on-one mode of amplification is to just go ahead and use automation, tools, techniques, and reduce the amount of effort required to create the same experience. Right? So experience is a constant, but you're reducing the effort required to create that experience. But then there are the disruptive minds who would go and look at saying keep the effort the same and multiply the experience, which is the second axis, saying just keep the effort the same, but just completely disrupt the experience, which is actually the hardest thing to do, because whenever you want to drive change, there would be a surge in effort and then again a normalization. But the point is, how do you achieve that axis? And the third is essentially move up the curve, which is proportionately, if you will, increase the effort and the experience, the human experience that your business causes to your consumers, to your customers, to your employees, whichever axis you take. How do you really do that? And I think this is the subject of thinking, of saying, how do you really identify which parts of your business need which part of thinking when it comes to effort and experience, so to say, relationships. Because it's not that there is a one-size-fits-all and everybody has to be on this axis or this axis or that axis. It's just that we are very complex and large global businesses, and then we have to look at which parts of businesses require which kind of amplification strategy. And so we go and look at what we are doing across different parts of our life for our customers, and what are they doing for their consumers, to be able to get a sense of where should we apply automation, factors of artificial intelligence, more techniques, more science to sustain the experience at a much lower effort point. Where should we go and invest disproportionately into new ideas, new thinking? I saw a lot of discussion around design thinking. We have embraced design thinking in a very big way to look at how do you really design new experiences such that your effort amplification is very different. And in certain areas which are high intensity, high touch, high fidelity areas is where you would see a proportionate change between human effort and human experience. Now let me talk about a series of things that we have done to learn some of these facets. So if we talk about the axis going straight upwards, which is this whole question about how do you change the experience while keeping, so to say, effort as constant. So sometime back in 2011, we decided to think about how do you change our customers' relationship with their customers or consumers in 6 areas. The areas where they are actually sensing their needs, or they are influencing their needs, or they are fulfilling or serving, and foundational areas like finance and all the other aspects of how do you do that. So sense, influence, fulfill, and serve is the experience cycle. How do I really sense? How do I really influence? How do I fulfill? And how do I serve? And with that context in mind, we said we are going to develop some interesting products, and we are going to develop some interesting technologies that can help our customers do this. Being a technology company, that's the reflex. But I want to immediately come back into what does that mean for the organization. For example, if you in your respective organizations wanted to do something like this, then it's not that we are a 160,000, 170,000 people employee company, and in that you are trying to then build a very different kind of an organization. And coming back to the topic of my talk, which is reorganizing and rethinking efficiency. And that is when we said we have to completely carve in, not carve out, carve in a very different culture into this kind of an environment, into this kind of a setup. Initially, what you would typically do, and I'm sure you see that in your lives, is you would create something which is ring-fenced and supported by the leadership, and you set up a team, which is like an innovation team, which would go ahead and you'll organize that into a cell which is guarded and protected, and the general rules of the organization don't apply to this cell, and you'll say, go do something new. But more often than not, that thing does not survive, does not last for a long period of time, because they are more or less in an environment where the meaning of efficiency or the meaning of effort to experience ratio is similar. So all the time you get pulled into an environment, the kind of people you meet, the kind of things you do, the kind of daily conversations you have when you go to the cafeteria to have your lunch, what is the kind of environment you deal with, and your mental calibration of what is the ratio of what you are doing and what is its amplification into experience it's creating for customers is similar. It kind of gets normalized again and again and again. It's very hard to keep them separate. So we did 5 things to create this kind of a environment in which we could bring about such a change. First and foremost, we said we have to change at the highest level the investment philosophy of such an endeavor or such an effort. So the team that is looking at a very different paradigm of effort to experience ratio, they have to have a very different investment mindset, because you cannot do it by containing and continuing with the same kind of mindset. How do you make investments into talent? How do you make investments into technology? How do you make investments into understanding the customers better? How do you make investments into relating to different parts of the world, new technologies, startups, and those kind of things? How do you really create that paradigm? What is the investment philosophy where people are expected to completely change their mindset about what they do and what is the amplified impact it has on customers and consumers? Second was talent, and I think that was the most interesting thing to do. We completely decided to reorganize the team such that they literally had to lose the identity with the larger organization. Because you can imagine in a company which is 170,000 people strong, there is a huge sense of association and identity with that company. And it's not easy to tell employees to actually give up that identity and assume a new identity and be passionate about it. It's not that simple, because there is association in many ways of being there. I had parents of my employees calling me and saying, "Why are you doing this? There is so much of pride that my child has in connecting with your mothership, so to say, and now all of a sudden you want them to take on this new identity. And why do you really want to do this?" And then we had to explain to them. We had spouses calling up, and that's, in some ways, it's heartwarming because the family is passionate about the larger identity, but at the same time, it's a very hard question to sort of give people the excitement to take on a new identity, which is a very different kind of an organization. And in this process of creating that employee association, we also laid down certain fundamentals as to what kind of talent is required here. And it's very surprising that when you go around looking for that kind of talent in your existing organization, to create this kind of a culture where the effort to experience ratio is very different, you find a very small set of people who can actually do that. And when you find a very small set of people who can actually do that, that's when it becomes even more harder, because all of a sudden you have to deal with questions like, why are they different? Are we creating a different class of people? Because we are going to change everything. We're going to change what we call them. We're going to change what we pay them. We're going to change how are they organized. What are the rituals? Because every organization has their own rituals, things that you can do and things that you can't do in an organization. And now within the organization, we are trying to create a subculture which is completely different set of rituals. And for example, even how you would run meetings, or how you'd organize your workspaces, and all those kind of things. And so we took on a very, so to say, involved process, if you will, to get all the people who were onboarding this team to actually come together and design this organization, instead of us designing it and saying, you come and onboard this, because that is something that would not necessarily be the right solution. So we got the people to say, you build this, and Infosys takes a lot of pride in being entrepreneurial, given the history of 7 people starting and getting it to 170,000. And we said, you are now the founders of this new entity, so now you found this. And lay down the principles. And then, of course, you have this larger ecosystem which will come back with policies and stuff like that. And, somebody like Ajay would come and say, where are your audit guidelines? And are you guys really adhering to the security parameters and what's your business continuity plan and what have you. And we started by saying we have nothing because we don't want anything. We don't want a baseline. And so creating that non-baseline culture is a very interesting experience of trying to create this setup which has a very different amplification ratio between what you put in as an effort and what it creates as a customer experience, because you have to free up the mind of many of the things that you do currently. We always discuss this interesting example. When you look at automobiles, there are some automobiles which require an inordinate amount of energy to carry themselves. And usually when you have large and complex organizations, they require an inordinate amount of energy to carry themselves. Imagine a situation if they were not serving a single customer tomorrow morning, at least 65 to 70% of the organization would still be working extremely hard. Right? And that happens. It's like saying if there was no passenger inside the car and the car was driving itself, it still needs 65 to 70% of its energy just to drive itself. Right? And then the rest is for the rest. And this is the classical challenge in this game of amplification, is that you have such an enormous amount of energy to just carry yourself. And we did not want to do that. And we wanted to start with something saying, I don't need more than 5-10% of my energy to carry myself, but I would rather spend all my time in designing these new customer experiences, designing these new human capabilities for our clients and stuff like that. Then I need to be freed of all these things. But of course, you have a larger organization around you who has its needs and demands, and so then that's when the role of leadership comes into play, right? So I would typically stand in as the barrier to this setup to say, you cannot, you have to get past me. In many ways, if you want them to do something, then you have to get past me. And then there would be interesting instances or examples that say we need a policy for this. I'm saying, but I don't need this policy. No, we need a policy for this. And so there have been instances when I would write a policy that our policy for this is that we don't have a policy, and we would just sign that off and document it somewhere and move on with life, right? And I'm sure that happens in large and complex organizations across the world, that there are certain things which are rituals of the traditional organization, and then you're trying to create this reorganized new entity within, which is very different in structure, including when you get inside the premises, the security person could change your experience, right? Because the security person is tuned to work in a certain way, and this new organized entity could come into a very different mindset when it comes to dealing with the security people. And it's in small things. That's where you tend to fall back into this side of the equation, where you say, I can't do anything to change the human experience of my customers, because all that I can do is become more efficient. We're saying, no, that's not the point. The point is you have to go up and completely change your mind and do something new. So we worked on that across all dimensions of talent as to how do we appraise people, right? And we said we will go completely ground scratch up. We'll scrap the appraisal system and start again, and design it all from scratch. How do we create designations of people? What do you call people, right? That also needs to completely rewire and rechange as to what do you call these people, how do you designate them, and how is it relevant to the marketplace, rather than traditionally, is it a question of hierarchy, or is it a question of does it mean something to your customers? We are going to completely change all the operating procedures and policies and how we do. And that's a lot of doing in a large organization. In a startup, it's very different, because in a startup, people would then put these things together because they have the entire whiteboard to start with. But this is not whiteboard. This is a 170,000 people organization, which has got extremely scalable, highly efficient, very solidly wired processes. And they work extremely well, and they have served us well to bring us from 7 to 170,000 and growing. And now all of a sudden you want to challenge that entire paradigm. I'm not here to change 170,000, but I have to reorganize the work and the entire thinking of this team so that they can create this kind of business. The other aspect of talent is what kind of people would work on this. And there are people outside the organization who have to then say, yeah, that part of your organization I want to work with. I may not want to work with the rest of the organization, right? And so then how do you open that channel for people to come in and associate? The first time I went out on a hiring spree, I had a real hard time because people would still associate me with the overall traditional model. And they would say, no, not you. You don't fit into my mental model of what I want to do. We had to do a lot of work with the markets outside in terms of the talent pools of people to be able to convince them, saying whether you work for a very small entrepreneurial startup or whether you work for me, it's all the same. Right? That took a lot of doing itself. And so multiple facets of talent, org structures, and we had to literally cast these from ground up. And it's not difficult to do because the rest of the organization, and I'm sure you will have this question sometimes if you try to attempt to do this, will come and say, how did you do this? Because in retrospect, they are seeing that we did it all, right? And it's now functioning. It's a separate, EdgeVerve is a separate company. It is still a part of the same ecosystem with completely different environment, completely different org structures, and everybody else is coming and saying, at the beginning we thought, no way, you would not be able to do this. And now we're looking back and saying, how the hell did you do this, right? And it's here. And now, sometimes when we will go to larger town halls, people will ask questions saying, if they can, why can't I, right? And that question has started in the larger organization saying, if they can do it, why can't, how did they do it? And I think the essence of that was, what is the role that leadership plays, and what is the role that the employees play in founding this up? But the whole premise there was that a very small set of people will create disproportionate experience for our clients. So let me come to the third facet of what does this mean, right? In terms of our business logic, that means obviously a disproportionate relationship between effort and revenues, but that's on the business side. But from a customer side, it is about how do you get very intense and very exciting insights about customers and create new kinds of capabilities and new kinds of experiences for them. Because if you got the talent architecture right, then their ability to think about consumers and customers very differently is very, very different. So if you look at what kind of things this team is now doing, is really worrying about what are the consumers of our customers dealing with, and hence how do I bridge that and increase the experience of their lives. Right? Whether it's a bank, whether it's a retailer, or whether it's a insurance company, whether it's a manufacturer, but their entire mindset is wired towards thinking, saying, who am I serving and who are they serving and what can I do to change that paradigm? Then comes the infusion of different tools and techniques, and whether it's design thinking or whether it's new forms of technology, new kinds of architectures, etc., those then suddenly become tools rather than objectives to actually create that kind of a different experience. So they're looking at ecosystems, and I saw on the agenda, I think John was talking about ecosystems, but the question is they're looking at saying, so we have this saying inside this subculture, if you will, that enterprise is not enterprise anymore. Ecosystem is the enterprise, right? You're just one more player in the ecosystem. So how do you think about ecosystems, and how do you think about bringing on the entire ecosystem? How do you think about experience itself? And so we started working through some new paradigms in experience in the context of how people are running their business and working their clients. But I think the foundation of that was the way we organize this. Because it's not that the concepts are ever new, but it's just that they're not executed on a scalable fashion because the underlying structure is struggling with its definition, its existence, its survival, and more often than not, over time, it has a half-life. It sort of dissipates itself into being. So we created this organization called EdgeVerve. Like Rohit mentioned, I was the CEO of EdgeVerve till April, when they said, okay, this one is done, go break something else. And so I'm now heading consulting with a different charter of breaking the paradigms of how consulting is done in this world. But the fundamental of EdgeVerve was essentially to create a very, very different ratio between the effort that is put in by people and the kind of experiences it creates for our customers, both for our customers and for us, in that sense. So the third important aspect was how do you go to market? Because all of a sudden our customers don't believe that you can do something like this, right? Because if I will even come to my clients and say we can do something like this, which is highly disruptive, very different, and very unique, they would say, yeah, but they see the entire mothership and they say, can you really do this? Because I have seen you very often, and I think you can do my programs, you can do my projects, you can of course run my testing and this, that, and the other. but can you really change the way I relate to my consumers? And so that's an enormous task by itself in terms of how do you change the paradigms in the minds of the people we are serving. Right? So that again became the fourth track, if you will, in completely rethinking how we relate to our customers. That journey is still on. We are not yet done, because that is something that takes a few years to settle down till before customers really believe that, yes, you can be as disruptive. But the good news is wherever the customers have believed in us, we were able to disrupt the way they were doing things for their markets and for their clients. The next area which was to do with was this entire thinking of engineering. How do you develop technology? And classically, we have been in the technology industry for 33 years now. And so we tend to believe that we know how to do this very well, because we do it for thousands of companies worldwide. But very quickly we realized that if you want to create that amplification between effort and experience, the way you use technology, the way you build technology, the way you develop software is extremely different, and very, very, very new paradigms you have to exercise. Changing from, we used to release our products probably about once in 9 months to 12 months, and then bringing it down to months, 1 month, and then sub 1 month to a week, and changing the entire mindset of the speed at which you can iterate with the market becomes extremely important. And that again is a major culture shift, because, and I always debate this with the team saying, what's important to you? Is time more important or is content more important? Right? Because if time is more important, the release will go out on nth day, on this day. And whatever is in. Whatever is not in can wait for the next release. And if content is more important, we'll hold it. It's like you fly planes every day, so you go to the airport. The plane is going to leave at 9:45, hopefully, if the plane is not running late, keeping that aside. So 9:45, it's going to leave. If the passenger doesn't make it, the plane leaves. Right? Gone. And then you have to figure out what to do with the next flight. But if you go into the container kind of industries, which are freight carriers, etc., then they will wait till the container is full. And then you will time it once the container is done and full, then you will. The concomitant processes around this are very different. And that's a very different culture. Because in the first case, you have to think about the passenger missed the flight. So what do? Rebooking, rerouting, next flight, make it easy. The experiences are very different. But if you go to the other industry, there it is, the consignment is running late, inform the customer, consequential damages, warehousing. So we're dealing with very different kind of mindsets when it comes to doing this, which is the relationship between time and content. So if we want a disproportionate impact between effort and experience again, then we have to really make a decision whether our experience is a function of time or is it a function of content. If it is a function of time, then things have to go out when the time is done. If it is a function of content, then that sets off a very different culture. So we adopted the mindset saying we will be a function of time, which means on this day, the next capability for our customers goes out. And now the entire culture then weaves around it, because then everybody is saying, I have to make the time. I have to ensure that I'm done. So I'm looking at my work and I'm trying to reorganize what I should be doing, rapidly prioritize what should make it on that time. The second important facet of this was that change is like a radioactive reaction, which means every change that you make then subsequently changes all the rest of the plans. And especially when you're in high rapid iteration customer experience environments, then you go and make the first change, and depending on the reaction of the customer, rest of your plans get busted. So how do you organize for that? How do you really think about completely rethinking at the point of, so you plan 5 steps of change and the first step busts your 4 steps. They're of no use anymore. And now you have to recast, recalibrate, and go all over it again. So again, bringing that into the culture of the team. And the good thing was that what we were doing with about 2,500 people as a business, after doing this transformation, we were doing the same thing with 673 people and actually getting much more done. We're getting much more done. We were much more precise to the market. We were much more effective. Our velocity was higher because of this entire new paradigm of effort to experience ratio as to what are we doing differently, right? Because in 170,000 people, throwing in a team of 2,500 people is not a big deal. We can assemble it very, very quickly. But that was not the point. It was missing the point, right? And the way we have now crafted this business from a business strategy perspective is we can literally grow 10 times with almost very marginal increase in the overall central team size. Which is that's the reason I placed it, saying that the effort to experience ratio is something that is a very important factor in creating this kind of a business, rethinking how are we doing, how are we organizing, how are we driving this, because the classical constructs will fail if we try to do it for us in that context. And now if I abstract this to any business for that matter, whether you are in the business of retailing or whether in the business of the classical paradigm of saying if you want a high fidelity experience, it requires more effort, I think is the one that needs to be challenged. And that's the only thought process I want to leave with you, is that high fidelity experiences don't necessarily require very high effort. But what's important is we have to redefine what is the meaning of efficiency, what is the organization, and how are we doing this to get that disproportionate amplification, if you will, of human capabilities, which involves how do you select your talent, how do you message the market, what's your investment philosophy, what's the underlying engineering. And I'm using engineering broadly because I don't only mean software engineering. It could be a business process. It's the way you do things. However, whatever is your way of defining what you do, in that sense, I'm using engineering more as a term rather than engineering as software engineering. And the whole aspect of what is the leadership, the culture that is entrusted with doing something like this, because obviously it's extremely complex, it's extremely hard, but it's a lot of fun. If you come to EdgeVerve facilities someday, if you are in Bangalore, and you would be surprised by that environment, that energy, and that's why I use the term re-energizing the organization. The kind of energy that organization carries is infectious to the extent that we could actually energize our CFO, which is not easy. And he came and he spent an evening with us, and he says, "What did you guys do? Right? This is a very different level of energy here, and everybody is so fired up. And so what have we done?" We said, "We did a lot, and one of the important things was keep you out of this." But jokes apart, he is one of our most ardent believers and instrumental in our success. So I was just joking about that. But what's most important is this whole aspect of what is, and for me, the personal realization was that because of organizational constructs, the way we design things, the way we define things, we have contained our minds and contained our people. We have put them into definitions of roles, definitions of process, definitions of what they can do and they can't do, boundary conditions, and that has its own consequence in terms of the ratio between the effort and experience. And if we really have the courage or the confidence to actually break this, then that can have amazing consequences and amazing outcomes, which I have seen myself in my life. In a large organization, I keep on stressing upon this because I'm not talking about what you could do in the valley or what you could do in, that's a very different environment. I'm talking of a large, global, extremely stable, complex organization, and you try to do this sort of disruptive magic within, then it has its own desired and undesired consequences, and how do you deal with that? Today we are at a point that this team is stable, growing at a very fast pace. Last year we grew the business by 45%, and this year we are actually expecting almost a 300% growth, because last year was the foundation period of that business. The customers we work with are extremely surprised and excited by what we are able to do for them. To say, well, we didn't think that you could do something like this, and we tell them we didn't think it either till we actually got this organized. So let me sort of pause at that point. I would rather spend most of the time answering any questions that you have, but this entire mindset of effort to experience ratio is at the heart of amplification. How do I take, if I have 160,000 employees, how do I take 1,000 people and amplify their capabilities to a point where they can do pretty much what 4,000 people could accomplish over a period of time? And how do I do that again and again and again? And now, so that journey is on to look at different areas and create this sort of thinking process of how do you amplify people. And so we are doing a lot of work now in automation. We are doing a lot of work in design thinking. We just finished training 28,000 people on design thinking to light a fire, if you will, inside the organization. We have started what we call as a zero distance initiative as to how do you take each of our employees and reduce their distance to customers, technology, and economic value, which essentially is experience, engineering, and economics. How do you really change that? Because this is a small piece, but we have to do this now across a much larger spectrum, if you will.